Welcome to the Long Way Through Scripture. I'm Catherine Schaefer. This is a slow walk through the Bible. It's not rushed, there's no pressure, just one section at a time, letting it unfold as it does. Each week, we're not trying to master Scripture, we're simply learning how to stay with it a little longer than we normally would. We're allowing the story to speak before we rush ahead. If you're following along and want something to help you process what you're reading, there is a companion workbook for this podcast. It's simple and steady, just something to help you reflect and stay grounded in the text as you go. You can find it in the show notes at catherineschaefer.com. It's there if you want it, not something you have to keep up with. And I'm really glad you're here. So let's begin week 27, Book of Job. After spending the last several weeks walking through the history of Israel, the Book of Job almost feels like stepping into a different world. There are no kings to follow, no nation to rebuild, and no timeline connecting us to the events we've been reading. Instead, Scripture invites us into the life of one man whose story asks some of the deepest questions people have wrestled with throughout history. Why do good people suffer? Why does life sometimes fall apart without warning? Where is God when nothing seems to make sense? Those are not easy questions, and one of the reasons Job has remained so important through the centuries is because the book never treats them as though they are simple. The opening chapters introduce us to a man described as upright, faithful, and devoted to God. Job is not presented as someone living a perfect life, but he is portrayed as someone who genuinely seeks to honor the Lord. He has a family, great wealth, respected standing, and a life that appears stable from every outward perspective. Then, almost without warning, everything changes. In a series of devastating events, Job loses his livestock, his servants, children, and eventually his own health. The speed with which these tragedies unfold is difficult to comprehend. One messenger arrives before another has even finished speaking. Loss piles upon loss until it feels almost unbearable. As readers, we are given information that Job himself never receives. We witness a conversation in heaven that explains why these events are taking place. But Job lives through the story without that perspective. That difference is important because it places us in a unique position. We know something Job does not, yet even we are not given every answer. The book quickly reminds us that there are realities beyond our understanding. When the disasters finally stop, Job responds with words that have echoed through generations. The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Those words are not spoken because Job understands everything that has happened. They are spoken because, in the middle of overwhelming grief, he still knows who God is. As the story continues, three friends arrive to comfort him. Their first response is perhaps the wisest thing they do. They sit with Job in silence for 7 days because his suffering is so great that words seem inadequate. Sometimes presence is more valuable than explanation. Unfortunately, once the conversations begin, that wisdom starts to disappear. Job's friends are convinced suffering must always be connected to personal sin. Their reasoning is straightforward. God is just. Therefore, if someone is experiencing this level of hardship, they must have done something to deserve it. Job knows that explanation doesn't fit his situation. He examines his life honestly. He wrestles with his own heart. He asks difficult questions. Yet he cannot confess to something he has not done simply to satisfy his friends' understanding of how the world should work. That tension carries much of the book. Conversation after conversation explores questions about justice, suffering, wisdom, and God's ways. At times, the discussions become repetitive, but that repetition reflects something true about grief itself. People often circle the same questions again and again, searching for an answer that finally brings peace. As you read through Job, you may find yourself agreeing with different people at different moments. Job speaks honestly, sometimes with remarkable confidence and other times from deep frustration. His friends occasionally say things that sound true in isolation, yet they repeatedly apply those truths in ways that fail to comfort someone who is suffering. One of the most valuable lessons in Job comes through recognizing that true statements can still be used poorly. Not every hurting person needs an explanation. Tragedy can be reduced to a simple formula, and not every question receives an immediate answer. That can feel uncomfortable because we naturally want life to make sense. We want clear reasons and predictable outcomes. Job refuses to give us that kind of certainty. Instead, it invites us to remain in the uncomfortable places. As the conversations continue, Job never hides what he is feeling from God. He asks questions, he laments, he expresses confusion. At times, he longs for answers that never seem to come. There is something deeply encouraging about that honesty. The Bible does not present faith as pretending pain doesn't exist. It shows us a man bringing his pain directly to God. Eventually, after many chapters of conversation, God answers Job. What often surprises first time readers is the way God responds. He does not explain every detail of what happened. He does not walk Job through the conversation that took place in heaven. Instead, he asks Job a series of questions about creation, the natural world, and the limits of human understanding. Where wast thou when I laid the foundations of the earth? It is not a harsh rebuke meant to silence honest questions. Rather, it gently reminds Job that there is an enormous difference between what God sees and what human beings are able to see. Job has been asking, why? God responds by revealing who. The focus shifts away from complete explanations and back toward the character, wisdom, and sovereignty of God. That may not satisfy every question, but it changes the perspective from which those questions are asked. By the end of the book, Job recognizes that his understanding has been limited. He has encountered God in a deeper way. Even though not every mystery has been solved, eventually restoration comes. His fortunes are renewed, his family grows again, and his life continues. Yet I don't think restoration is the main point of the book. If we focus only on the ending, we risk overlooking everything that came before it. The heart of Job is not that everything eventually worked out. The heart of Job is that God remained worthy of trust, even when Job could not understand what was happening. That is a difficult lesson, because most of us would prefer certainty. We would like every hardship to have a clear explanation, every prayer to receive an immediate answer, our suffering to follow rules that make sense to us. Job gently reminds us that faith sometimes means trusting God's character when we cannot trace his purposes. So as you read through Job this week, resist the temptation to rush toward the final chapter. Sit with the conversations. Notice the honesty. Pay attention to the questions that remain unanswered. Watch how often people assume they know more than they actually do. The reflection to carry with you this week is this: faith is not having every answer. Faith is continuing to trust the one who does. Job never received every explanation he wanted, but he encountered the God who had been present through every moment of his suffering. That encounter changed him far more deeply than a simple answer ever could have. And that is where this part of the journey leaves us. Learning that even when life raises questions we cannot answer, God's wisdom remains greater than our understanding. As you move into the reading this week, remember, there's no rush. Read slowly, read a little at a time, or simply sit with the passages if that's what the week allows. Scripture doesn't ask us to perform, it invites us to remain. Everything connected to this journey lives in the show notes. If you're looking for more than podcast episodes, I also send a weekly email called Walking It Out with Catherine. You can subscribe for free through the website at catherineschaefer.com using the link below in the show notes. And then don't forget to hit the follow or subscribe button so we can stay connected for more of these conversations. Thank you for walking this long way with me. I'll meet you here again next week. God bless.